If you told me 10 years ago I'd be choosing softwood over hardwood, I would have laughed right in your face, probably while holding an armload of oak. But these days, I burn softwood far more often. Now you might be wondering what changed. Hardwood still has its place. But over time, I noticed that in certain situations, softwood simply worked better. And one reason became obvious on cold winter mornings. You get up before dawn, the house has been cooling for hours, your breath shows in the air, the stove is stone cold, and you need heat now, not in 45 minutes. Softwood was practically designed for this moment. It has a lower ignition temperature. It carries natural resins and oils in its fibers that help it catch quickly. You put flame to good dry softwood, and it responds. It grabs. It climbs. Where a piece of dense hardwood might sit there slowly blackening while you blow on it and rearrange the kindling for the fourth time, softwood is already going, already building. I have started fires with well-seasoned pine that were throwing heat in under 5 minutes from a cold stove. 5 minutes. Anyone who has spent 20 minutes nursing a stubborn oak log with newspaper and a frustrated attitude knows exactly how much those 15 minutes matter when your fingers are cold and you are wearing 3 sweaters indoors. And this is not just a comfort thing. There is a real efficiency argument here too. A stove that reaches operating temperature faster is running in its efficient range sooner. That means less incomplete combustion, less smoke, more heat into the room. The fast ignition of softwood is actually moving the whole system forward, not just your mood. Less frustration, heat faster, and that speed carries right into the next advantage, which is one most people never think to connect to wood species at all. Here is something that trips people up. Fast burning does not mean inefficient, it means fast heating. And fast heating is sometimes exactly what you need. Softwood releases its energy quickly. The BTUs go into your room and your air, instead of being rationed out slowly over a 6-hour burn. When you need a space warmed up in a hurry, that rapid release is your friend. Hardwood burns slow and steady. That is a real strength, but it also means the heat comes gradually. You load hardwood into a cold stove, and you might wait a while before the room genuinely responds. The output builds slowly as the wood settles in. Softwood is the opposite. It gets cooking, and the room feels it fast. Think about a chilly morning in a cabin. You want heat now, not in an hour. Softwood. A quick fire in the evening before you settle in for the night, something you are not counting on to burn until morning. Softwood. A fire to take the chill off a cool afternoon in October when you do not want to run the thing for 8 hours. Softwood. Hardwood is the slow cooker of firewood. Perfect for low and slow, for the long overnight burn, for sustained output over time. Softwood is the stovetop. Fast response, quick heat, more hands-on, but immediately effective. And the stovetop is not inferior to the slow cooker. It just does a different job, which becomes especially obvious during one particular part of the heating season that softwood completely owns. Spring and fall are genuinely tricky times for wood burners. The nights drop low enough that you want a fire going. The mornings are cool. But it is September, or April, or early May. It is not the dead of winter. You do not need the house running at sauna temperature. You just want to be comfortable without wearing a down jacket in your own living room. This is where burning hardwood in shoulder season becomes its own little problem. You load up with the good seasoned oak because that is what you have been told is the right wood. 2 hours later, you are opening windows in November trying to cool things back down. The stove is cranking, the house is pushing 80 degrees, and the fire is going to burn for 4 more hours, whether you like it or not. Hardwood in mild weather is like wearing a winter parka in 50-degree temperatures. Yes, you are technically warm. You are also wildly overdressed for the situation. Softwood gives you a fire that burns actively, heats the space properly, and then backs off before turning your home into a bread oven. You get real warmth, you get the ambiance of a good fire, and you can actually control the situation because the fire follows your input rather than just doing whatever it wants for the next several hours. That control is genuinely underrated. A fire you can manage as a comfortable home. A fire that overpowers your space on a mild day is a problem in disguise. And if part of the reason softwood is interesting to you is simply because it is what is available where you live, the next section has good news. Here is a practical reality that gets almost completely ignored in the hardwood versus softwood conversation. Availability is not optional, it is foundational. In enormous portions of North America, particularly in northern and western regions, softwood is what the landscape produces. Pine, spruce, fir, Douglas fir, lodgepole pine. These trees are everywhere. They come down in storms. They come from logging operations. They come from timber sales and forest thinning projects and people clearing land. They are accessible. They are abundant. And they are almost always substantially cheaper than comparable quantities of hardwood. In many areas, you could fill a woodshed twice over with quality softwood for what it costs to source a single cord of properly seasoned oak or hickory. And if you are cutting your own firewood from your own property or a timber sale, the odds are good that softwood is what is right there in front of you, while the good hardwood requires a longer search, a longer haul, or a longer wait. The firewood debate gets very theoretical very fast when people forget that wood heating is a practical, physical, logistical operation. You need wood that you can actually get in the quantities you need at a price that makes sense before winter arrives. A cord of pine you can actually access beats a cord of hickory you have to drive an hour and a half to find and then pay twice the price for. That is not settling. That is being sensible. And there is something else about where a lot of softwood comes from that most people never consider. Something that makes burning it feel like a genuinely good decision in ways beyond just heating your house. This does not come up in the firewood debates. It absolutely should. A large portion of the softwood that ends up as residential firewood comes directly from forest thinning operations. When a forest gets overcrowded, which happens naturally, and especially in forests that have been protected from low-intensity fires for decades, land managers go in and remove the smaller, weaker, or suppressed trees, the ones that are competing for water, nutrients, and light with the healthier trees around them. When those trees come out, the remaining stand gets stronger. The trees that stay have more room, more resources, and better structure. The forest becomes more resilient to drought, disease, and insects. And there is a fire risk angle here that is extremely significant right now. Dense, overgrown forests loaded with dead and dying softwood trees are exactly the conditions that turn a containable fire into a catastrophic one. When you thin that material out, you reduce the fuel load, you reduce fire intensity, you reduce the speed at which a fire can move through a landscape. The softwood that would otherwise sit and decay or contribute to a wildfire risk is now in your stove, heating your home. The forest is healthier, your home is warmer. The fire risk in your watershed went down. That is a system that actually makes sense when you look at the whole picture. Sometimes the wood everyone treats as second choice is the wood doing the most real-world good. But none of that matters if you still believe the single biggest myth about softwood and what it does to your chimney. It is time to deal with that directly. This is the one, the argument that ends every softwood discussion before it really gets started. Softwood creates dangerous creosote, burns dirty, ruins your chimney. Every chimney sweep will tell you the same thing. I heard that for years. Said it myself plenty of times. Here is what the research and the actual chimney professionals will tell you when you dig into the details. Creosote is primarily caused by incomplete combustion. Incomplete combustion is primarily caused by burning wet wood. Wet wood burns at a lower temperature, produces a lot of smoke and unburned particulates, and those particles coat the inside of your flue as they cool on the way up. The wood species is a secondary factor. The moisture content is the primary one. Take dry, properly seasoned softwood, wood that has been split and stacked with airflow for a full season and brought down to around 20% moisture content or below, and burn it in a hot, well-drafted stove. Those resins and oils that everyone blames for creosote, they combust completely. At proper burn temperatures, the volatile compounds in softwood go up as heat energy, not as sticky deposits on your chimney walls. The dangerous fire is the cool, smoldering, low-oxygen fire, the one running on green or wet wood at low temperature. That is your creosote factory. And that can happen with oak, with cherry, with any hardwood you put in a stove while it is still wet or while you are running the stove at low draft. Wet hardwood produces creosote, dry softwood does not. The species is the distraction. Moisture content is what actually matters. Season your softwood properly, burn it hot, your chimney will be in good shape. And the effort it takes to get there is actually quite a bit less than most people expect, for reasons that start before the wood ever reaches the stove. Here is the step nobody talks about in firewood videos. The step that comes before burning, before stacking, before even hauling. Splitting. And this is where softwood has an advantage so obvious you wonder why it never comes up. Softwood splits easier, significantly easier in most cases. The grain runs straighter, the wood fibers are less interlocked, and a maul drops into well-dried pine like it was designed specifically for that purpose. Some softwood practically falls apart while the maul is still coming down. Dense hardwood is a different experience. Anyone who has worked through a pile of gnarly oak, twisted elm, or anything with a knotty, interlocked grain knows exactly what I am talking about. You swing, it bounces. You swing again, same result. Eventually, you are standing there wondering if the log is personally insulting you. Seasoned well, the good hardwoods split fine. But they still take noticeably more effort than comparable softwood. This is not a trivial point for a lot of woodburners. If you are older, if you have anything going on with your back or shoulders, if you are processing large quantities by hand without a hydraulic splitter, the physical difference between splitting a rick of pine and a rick of hard-grain oak over the course of a day is real and significant. It also means faster processing, more wood ready to stack in less time, more energy left over at the end of the day, and the physical advantages do not stop when you are done at the splitting block. Firewood is not just burning. That part people understand, but sometimes they forget how long the chain of work is before any wood actually goes into a stove. Cutting, hauling, splitting, stacking, moving to the covered pile, moving again to the porch or wood box, carrying inside, loading the stove. Repeat that cycle hundreds of times across a winter, and the weight of what you are handling becomes a very real variable. Softwood is lighter. Every stage of that process is measurably easier. Carrying an armload of pine versus an armload of the same volume of dense oak is a noticeable physical difference. Over the course of a day, or a week, or an entire heating season, that difference accumulates into something you actually feel. Less strain on your back carrying loads from the woodshed. Less effort hauling into the house. Less fatigue at the end of a day of firewood work. I spent a lot of winters doing this work, and I will tell you from personal experience that the days I shifted to lighter softwood loads felt different by late afternoon. Not dramatically different, but enough to matter when you are doing it every single day. Most firewood content talks about burn quality and heat output. Very little of it acknowledges that the people doing the most wood heating are not always 25 years old with a perfectly healthy back. The physical reality of the work matters, and softwood makes it easier, which is part of why the approach that actually makes the most sense does not choose sides at all. Here is where the experienced burners land, and it is not where most people expect. They do not choose softwood or hardwood. They stop thinking about it as a choice entirely. They use both, deliberately, each one where it does the job best. Funny thing is, once you start thinking this way, the whole hardwood versus softwood argument starts looking like a pretty silly thing to argue about. Like debating whether a hammer is better than a screwdriver depends entirely on what you are doing. Cold morning, softwood. You put a couple of pieces of well-dried pine or fir alongside the kindling, and the stove is going in minutes. Fire catches fast. Temperature climbs fast. You are past the low-efficiency startup phase before a hardwood-only fire is even fully established. The room responds before you have finished your first cup of coffee. And on a cold morning, that is genuinely everything. Mild spring afternoon and you want a short, comfortable fire? Softwood, quick heat, manageable burn, dies down before it turns your living room into a greenhouse. You stay comfortable. You stay in control. Daytime loads, when you are around to reload and you want active heat, softwood handles that well too. Keep things lively, keep the stove hot, keep the combustion clean and efficient. You are managing it actively anyway, so the shorter burn cycle is not a disadvantage. It is just part of the rhythm. But then evening comes. You want that fire to carry through the night without you stumbling out of bed at 3 a.m. to reload. That is when you load the hardwood. Dense oak or hickory or maple. Let it settle into a slow, steady burn. Bank it properly. Wake up to real coals still radiating heat instead of a stove that gave up 4 hours ago and left the house to cool down on its own. That combination, that specific use of each wood type where it excels, is not a compromise between two imperfect options. It is actually the highest performing approach available to a wood burner. You are using the fast ignition and quick heat of softwood exactly when you need it, and the long burning density of hardwood exactly when you need that instead. Not loyalty, not ideology, not following a rule you heard once and never questioned, just using the right tool for the right moment. That is what practical experience eventually teaches everyone who burns wood long enough. And that practical thinking leads directly to the final and most important thing worth saying here. Hardwood is not always better. Say it out loud if you need to. Not because hardwood is bad. It is excellent wood. Dense, long-burning, high-energy output. Nobody serious is arguing against it, and nothing in this video is trying to tell you to throw your oak out and replace it with pine. But the idea that hardwood is always the better choice in every situation for every person in every climate running every type of stove is a simplification. A comfortable one. The kind that feels satisfying because it requires no further thought. A rule you can follow without ever asking another question, which is exactly why it stuck around so long. Simple rules feel great right up until they cost you more money, more effort, and more frustration than the situation actually required. I burned hardwood almost exclusively for years based on that rule, and I was getting good fires. But I was also spending more, working harder, fighting cold stoves on mornings when I did not have to, and refusing to use perfectly good softwood that was right there because I had decided it was inferior. It was not inferior, it was different, and different used correctly is often better. The smartest woodburners stopped following the rule and started asking the actual questions. What is my stove, and how does it run most efficiently? What does my climate and heating season actually demand? What are my real goals on any given day? A fast warm-up or a long, slow burn? And what wood can I realistically access in the quantities I need at a price that makes sense for my budget? Those four questions together produce a completely different answer than simply defaulting to hardwood every time. Someone in the Pacific Northwest with abundant Douglas fir and a modern high-efficiency insert is making a completely rational, well-informed decision burning softwood through most of their heating season. Someone in New England with a sugar maple woodlot and a drafty old farmhouse genuinely needs that hardwood density for the long, cold nights of January and February. Both of them are right. Both of them are answering the correct question, which is what works best here, not what does the internet say is universally superior. The wood everyone overlooks is often the wood that actually fits your life, and that, more than any BTU number or burn time comparison, is what makes good firewood. Softwood lights faster, heats quickly, handles shoulder season better than anything, is usually cheaper and easier to find, is significantly easier to split and carry, burns clean when properly dried, and works perfectly alongside hardwood in a smart two-wood heating system. It is not the inferior choice. It is often the smart one. The right question was never hardwood or softwood. It was always, what works best for my situation? If this changed how you look at what is sitting in your woodshed, drop a comment below. And if you have been sleeping on softwood all these years, maybe this winter is the time to give it a proper shot.